Welcome back. Chapter 10 of Junior Blaze, Birth of a Hero is here. So join me as I read it to you. Don't forget to check out the links. Chill Cow here on YouTube. And you can catch up with me on Facebook at Junior Blaze 2020. So let's dive right in. Chapter 10. Another day passed and MJ still hadn't heard from Nat. He assumed this was because he was so tied up with his new girlfriend, which MJ understood, but still thought his best friend could take a few minutes to scribble down a letter or two. MJ was also depressed because his time on the farm was coming to an end. School was starting in 2 weeks, and he still had to register for his freshman classes. MJ finished packing his bag and sat on the edge of the bed. Arthur was preparing a going-away meal, and it was nearly dinner time. He looked around the room with reverence. Although he had only been there a few months during the summer, he hadn't done much decorating. He had grown quite fond of his humble lodging. MJ stood, bag in tow, and made his way downstairs. He wasn't leaving until the morning, but it never hurt to be prepared. The familiar smell of pan-fried steak filled the air. MJ breathed it in deeply. Even though it was a pretty common meal at Arthur's house, he was still going to miss it. He set his bag down by the door and started to set the table. Arthur brought the food out shortly after, and they sat and said grace. "Gramps," MJ said between bites of food, "thank you." "What are you thanking me for?" Arthur asked. "For everything. For teaching me what real hard work is, for helping me with my powers, for telling me our family history. I feel like I needed all of it." "You did, boy," Arthur teased. "But don't forget to thank your parents, too. They played a huge part in this, even more than me." "I will. I promise." After dinner and cleanup, MJ prepared for bed. Arthur wasn't big on getting emotional, so they both went about their business like any other ordinary night. Once MJ lay down, he found himself unable to sleep. After what felt like hours of tossing and turning, he got up and retrieved his letters from Nat. He climbed on top of the covers and reread each one in their entirety until he could no longer keep his eyes open. He fell asleep upright in bed, a half smile on his face, ready to see his friend soon. MJ awoke to the sound of voices coming from downstairs. He couldn't quite make out what was being said, and his grandfather hadn't mentioned any company coming on the day of his departure. As a matter of fact, the entire time he was at the farm, they had never had company, raising MJ's suspicion even farther. He sprang from bed and quickly dressed, then sprinted to the main floor to see what exactly all the commotion was. The sight at the base of the steps nearly brought him to tears. "MJ Stevens, as I live and breathe," Nat said in his best faux Southern Belle accent. "I haven't seen you in a dog's age." "Nat, what are you doing here?" MJ exclaimed, giving his best friend a giant bear hug. "Ease up, bro. You're crushing my sternum," Nat gasped. "Oops, sorry about that. I didn't have to hold back with Gramps," MJ apologized, releasing his death grip. "You have got to remember, everyone isn't a superpowered tank like your family." Yeah. Speaking of family, are they here with you?" "Yup, they just walked outside while I was waiting for your lazy bones to get up." "Lazy, huh? You wouldn't last a week here doing what I've been doing." "Well, duh, nobody would argue that." The two friends continued to laugh, joke, and generally catch up. MJ didn't realize it while he was with Arthur, but he genuinely missed Nat. They stepped outside onto the front porch, and MJ was greeted by a smiling Deborah and an ambush of hugs and kisses. Although initially resistant, MJ gave in and returned his mother's affection. "I missed you so much, Marky Joe," Deborah said, wiping away a tear of joy from her bright eyes. "I missed you too, Mom," MJ replied, "and I still hate it when you call me that." "Did you and Nat catch up? Are you packed and ready to go?" Deborah asked. "We talked a little bit. Still so much more to chat about, though," MJ said. "Speaking of which," Nat chimed in, "I kind of promised Erica we would double date tomorrow." "Tomorrow? I don't even get a full day home to relax? Mom, please tell me we have other plans." "Afraid not, MJ. I'm just happy Nat will be out of our house for a change this summer." "The whole summer, Nat?" MJ chided his friend. "Well, I was bored, dude," Nat said, looking away as his cheeks turned red. "So, Mom, where are Dad and Gramps?" MJ asked as the trio walked down the porch stairs. "Is he still angry with me?" "He was wondering the same about you," Deborah replied. "He and Arthur went on a little walk to clear their heads." Just then, a quiet rumble began to approach, and a cloud of dust kicked up in a swirl around them. There was a heavy burst of wind and the sound of voices. When the mini sandstorm settled, Arthur and Marcus emerged. They were talking and laughing like old friends. "You still got it, old man. Thought I had you beat around Vegas, but you made a hell of a comeback near Chicago," Marcus said, catching his breath. "I may have lost a step, but I still got plenty in the tank," Arthur joked, throwing his arm around his son. "So, who won this time?" Deborah asked with a smile. "Ah, that's not important. We had a blast," Marcus said sheepishly before changing the subject. "MJ, son, how was your vacation?" "Dad, this has been the best summer of my life." "I'm happy to hear that, MJ." The two of them hugged while Nat, Deborah, and Arthur looked on and smiled. It was a nice moment that had to happen ever since MJ first discovered that Marcus was Blaze. They broke the hug and looked meaningfully at each other and their family. "Well, let's get this show on the road," Marcus said, shifting back into the general. They all helped MJ load his luggage into the car and then assisted Arthur in preparing a going-away lunch. It was a great meal of mashed potatoes, baked macaroni, fried chicken, salmon, green beans, peas, strawberry cheesecake, and apple pie. Nat ate so much that he could hardly move from the table when it was time to leave. They all said a hearty and loving farewell and promised to keep in better contact with each other moving forward. The drive home was a quiet one, mostly due to everyone being in a food-induced coma from their giant midday meal. The Stevens dropped Nat at his house on the way, and he mumbled something about their double date to MJ before sleep stumbling into his trailer. A few minutes later, the Stevens were home and unloading the car. After getting completely unpacked, MJ and his parents spent the rest of the day lounging and relaxing. Barely a word needed to be spoken as they just enjoyed being in each other's presence again. By 7 p.m., MJ was more than ready for bed. He skipped dinner, they all did, and made his way to bed. MJ awoke at 5 o'clock a.m. sharp the next morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He jumped out of bed and cooked breakfast for the family. He then decided to get an early start on his chores. By the time his parental units rose from their slumber around 7:30, the entire house was nearly spotless. "Hey," MJ said excitedly. "Thought you guys were going to sleep the day away." "What's all this?" Marcus asked his son, looking at the table after sharing a surprised look with Deborah. "I made us breakfast. I knew both of you had to work, and I want to spend the day with Nat before our double date tonight." "Well, that's a very kind gesture," Deborah said lovingly. MJ watched his parents eat his meal with a smile on his face. It felt good to be productive this early in the day. He cleaned up the table as they each prepared for work and left. MJ then waited as long as he could before calling Nat at around 8:30. "Bro, it's like the middle of the night," Nat fumed. "Just get up, man. I'm on my way over," MJ insisted. "You're coming over here?" "Dude, yes. Now get out of bed." MJ gathered a few belongings in a backpack and changed into a ratty Heroes of the Lost Battalion t-shirt and black gym shorts. He briefly considered using his sonic speed to get over to Nat's house quicker, but decided against it. Nat only lived a mile away. Running seemed unnecessary. He climbed aboard his trusty, if underused, mountain bike and made the short ride to the mobile home community bordering his neighborhood. As MJ approached the Hatcher's home, he noticed a few things. Firstly, the lawn, although small, had not been mowed in quite a while. And secondly, Nat's house looked completely abandoned. There were no cars in the driveway and no lights were on in the house. Mildly taken aback by this, MJ stepped onto the concrete stoop and knocked. No one answered. A little more disturbed, MJ knocked with more urgency. There was a rustling behind the door, then finally, the door cracked open. "Man, you got here faster than I expected," Nat said, voice still gravelly from a night of sleep. "I told you I was on my way, bro," MJ said with a shrug. "I assumed I had a few more minutes to rest my eyes," Nat said, simultaneously rubbing the crust from his lashes. "You know what happens when you assume," MJ laughed, voice full of snark. "Why are you in such a big stinking hurry to get over here?" "It's my first day with no adult supervision, and I got all these superpowers to play with." "Aw, yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Let's go have some fun." Nat got ready in a hurry, and the two boys set off downtown on their bikes. They decided downtown would be ideal, since they could be inconspicuous with little effort. They found a small park tucked away from any busy intersections, kitty corner from their new high school. They walked into the small wooded area and double-checked for any signs of potential witnesses. "So, sonic speed, eyesight, and super strength, huh?" Nat inquired. "And a partridge in a pear tree," MJ joked. "Well, how strong are you?" I could bale hay without much trouble. I also helped hold the farm equipment for my gramp sometimes when he worked on them. Never really tested my limits, though. Nat said while scanning the vicinity. He glanced over MJ's shoulder and spotted something he thought would be a true test. Over there. It's perfect. He ran excitedly past his friend and over to a small clearing with a few large rocks and an oak tree that was halfway uprooted from the ground. It looked like a small tornado had come through and lost power before finishing the job. MJ followed behind him, curious as to what exactly Nat was looking for. "What is it you expect me to do?" MJ asked as Nat gestured wildly at the half-fallen tree. "Dude, push the tree over. Do I have to be the brains of this operation too?" MJ gave Nat a playful shove and walked over to the oak. He placed his back against the side closest to the ground and braced himself with his arms out wide and both knees bent. He took a few deep breaths and thrusted upwards with all his strength. The tree didn't budge. He snuck a peek at Nat, who was still watching excitedly. MJ gathered himself and began to push up again, harder this time. The oak tree fought back, but a loud creak and the sound of snapping wood indicated it was losing. It started to rise, slowly at first, before picking up speed. MJ spun around and gave one more final push, sending the mighty oak tree tumbling down, ripping the roots free from the ground. "Timber," MJ said to Nat, striking a pose with his hand on his hips and head tilted skyward. Nat looked on in awe, his jaw practically on the ground and his eyes nearly completely bugged out of his head. "Holy Jesus, Mary and Joseph," Nat shouted so loudly that his voice cracked. "That was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life." "Calm down, man. Somebody might hear you." They quickly looked around to make sure that their activities had gone unnoticed. Once they were sure they were clear from being spotted, they continued looking for other ways to test MJ's capabilities. Nat had him lift the fallen tree and move it to the other side of the clearing, where he then broke it into smaller pieces by punching it repeatedly. After the tree was obliterated, they moved on to MJ's other powers. MJ, getting more excited by the moment, lifted Nat over his head and took off in full sonic speed. Grass and dirt and twigs flew in the air around them as they made lap after lap around the clearing. Both boys laughed hysterically after MJ finished his run as they fell over into the newly formed crater in the woods. "Bro, I wish I could tell Erica about all this," Nat giggled as they wound down. "You know why you can't, right?" MJ replied, smile fading quickly and replaced by a stern glare. "Yes, of course, MJ. I would never betray you like that. You do understand that, right?" Nat asked, imitating his friend's tone. They both nodded in silent agreement. There was an unspoken trust between the two of them that was nearly unbreakable, and they wanted to keep it that way. They lay on the ground laughing and making jokes, just generally having a good time. They talked for what felt like hours before Nat brought them back to reality. "Man, we really should head back. We have a date tonight. Erica and Emily are both excited to meet you." "Yeah," MJ said, reluctantly getting up. "I'm kind of excited too." That's the end of Chapter 10 of Junior Blaze, Birth of a Hero. Check me out on Facebook at Junior Blaze 2020. And I'll be dropping Chapter 11 Thursday at 8 p.m. I'm not sure what's going on next week. I might not be here for the read, but I will get that at some point. I just got to figure out my own schedule. Until then, peace out, folks.